Hey, what's good, YouTube? Today I have a review on a mouse pad from Japan. This is the Ninja RatMat. This pad has been really hyped up. People said very good things about it. You cannot get this in America without a middleman from Japan or being in Japan, because they don't ship outside of Japan. But this thing is very expensive. I think it's like $500 to $800 on their site or something like that. It's like a crazy price, but the quality is definitely there. It's definitely worth it. So when I first got this mouse pad, it was packaged. Just the packaging was even insane. It was like the most carefully packed item I've ever got in my life. And you can tell just by the box, like it's not an American brand, but it comes in this nice little box. It just fits it perfectly. It comes in this nice little box, and my first impression of the mouse pad was that it looks extremely smooth. And it's definitely extremely smooth and quiet. Like, listen to this. This is the smoothest mouse pad I've ever used. And it's probably the best mouse pad I've ever used. And definitely the most expensive mouse pad I've ever used. It's made out of magnesium alloy, which is a very light structural metal, but it also has other metals, like a small amount. I think I did some research and it was like 10% or less of some other metals that are also in there. But yeah, it makes things lighter, and it's just really high quality. Like, look at this thing. So it's hard to compare it to, glass or ceramic pads over here in America, right? So it's completely different material. And that's been the hardest part about collecting my thoughts on this compared to everything else I own, because it's just unlike anything that we have over here at all. It's completely different, and the quality is just insane. It's so smooth. Listen to this. It's quiet. It's smooth. Even when obviously if I take my mouse across the entire pad, but just say you're doing normal aiming, incredibly quiet, incredibly smooth. And this was described to be, like, on their website it says something, I translated it. I'll link their website. It's in Japanese, you have to translate everything, but it said this pad is supposed to be conscious and the amount of slipping and stopping, which kind of implies that it's a balanced or a control pad, depending on how you might read that or see that. But it's definitely a balanced, more controlled, like, hard surface. This pad has the most insane stopping power out of any hard pad I've ever used, including the Serapad Ken. There are a couple pads I'll be comparing it to in terms of smoothness, performance, and stuff like that. But I kind of just want to keep talking about this thing. So I got it for the first day. The first day I was using PTFE, these are the red obsidians, on my Death Adder V3 Pro. The first day I got it, it took some time to adjust to this because of the insane control that this pad has down in the micro adjustments throughout the entire glide of the pad. Insanely controlled. You can just see it. And don't get me wrong, it can take off and there's speed when you need it. It's not like, this ain't no mud pad. This is not a mud pad or anything like that. But this has the most insane stopping power of any hard surface I've ever used. I was playing Overwatch. I played Widowmaker on this. I played Soldier 76. I took this game into the finals, did a lot of fast-paced tracking. I hit like 5 shots on Widowmaker in Overwatch, and I was just like, damn. I was just like blown away. Like, this thing stops so precisely and suddenly while still being like more of an open feeling pad than something like the Serapad Ken. It's almost like if you took the Serapad Ken and you mixed it with a pad like the Razor Atlas, something a bit quicker, or like the original Serapad, and you mixed it. But the main thing about this pad is, throughout the entire swipe, I find that there's a completely even amount of static and dynamic friction. From the second you start moving this mouse, it's the same across the entire glide. Completely even. I cannot notice that. It's not like a lot of pads here when there's like low static friction and a ton of dynamic friction. This pad is just even amount of force from when you start a movement to when you finish a movement. And that became apparent to me when I was in game and I was just putting my crosshair on like different things. I was just kind of moving it around. I started to just notice how smooth it was and how it had a perfect amount of static to dynamic friction. And that's something you can't get from pads here in America, at least from what I've seen so far. But the performance of this pad is insane. The quality is insane. My copy does have like some light scratches. I don't know if you can see these, but they're very light scratches. You can mostly only see them in the light, which is why I have this lamp right here. I have like some light shining on the surface, but there's their logo in the corner. The pad has like these little like rounded edges, I guess. They definitely shaped the edges like that. And it's a much smaller size to normal pads. Like there's the Serapad Ken, for example. Like the size is a little bit smaller, but I never felt like I was running out of Mousepad in game or in aim trainers. And I use a fairly high sense. I play on like 28 cm up to like 36 cm, just in that range. And even with the most intense reactive scenarios in aim trainers like Aim Beast, nothing that I threw at this pad stopped me from being able to perform with it. And sometimes in game, obviously, you do come into situations where, there's just different situations in game. Sometimes you have to look up, sometimes you have to look back, sometimes you don't even know what the hell is going on. You're trying to figure out what's going on because everything is chaotic and you're playing a like competitive shooter, right? So, you just got to keep in mind that there are situations where you may have to kind of reset your mouse from time to time, depending on what's going on and stuff like that. But in like aim trainers, most of the time when a bot is moving, like when a bot's moving one direction, it only stays that way for so long before it starts to switch directions again. You can smoothly, get back on target. And even when I had to pick up my mouse during those situations, I never had a problem smoothly getting back on target. It wasn't like I tried to flick or I had to, flick to get back on target or anything like that. This thing can handle any type of tracking. It has just enough speed. It really nails that amount of speed while still having like more stopping power than I find on the Serapad Ken. This is like a more open feeling pad to me than the Serapad Ken, while having like greater stopping power. And I'll do like a little glide test between the two pads, just so you can see. Obviously the Ken is a much bigger pad. So yeah, definitely a more noticeable amount of dynamic friction on the Ken compared to this, in my opinion. But in terms of smoothness, this pad is insanely smooth. It's the smoothest pad I've ever felt It's insanely smooth. It's very quiet, insanely smooth. I'll compare it to the SkyPad 4.0. And when it comes to using the SkyPad 4.0, it is insanely smooth. But if you listen closely, I feel like you get less of that like scratchy feeling. So yeah, even though movements are very smooth on the SkyPad 4.0, I find that there's an uneven amount of static and dynamic friction, whereas on the Ninja Pad, it's just completely even. And I'll also like kind of show you with the Razer Atlas, like a sound test. As far as like pads that come close to the Ninja Pad, I think the Razer Atlas is one of the closest, like on the US market. But what I don't like about the Atlas is that when it comes down to making like micro adjustments or stopping, it still has that slippery kind of glass feeling sometimes. And you can eliminate that by using Obsidian Pros. That's what I eventually started doing with this pad to get it to play the way I prefer. But I definitely think this pad is like the most comparable to this as far as like what's on the market. But it doesn't have that stopping power and the insane like, it doesn't have the perfect amount of like static to dynamic friction I keep talking about, where when you make movements and you're aiming at stuff, the amount of force when you start a movement is the same throughout the entire movement. It's just insanely smooth. It gives you that locked in feeling. It's almost like when you play on a fast pad like the SkyPad, you feel like you have a raw aiming input. It's almost the same thing with this, but it's like controlled. It's like a controlled raw aiming input, if that makes sense. And that's how I feel about this pad. It's insanely smooth. Look at this thing. It is insanely smooth. Like, people need to start making mouse pads out of this shit in the US. That's just insane. We're just cheap over here, I guess. I'm sure it's very expensive to make these, but trying to think if there's anything else. To talk about the performance some more. You can see that really the Serapad Can and the Atlas are like the only two pads I can kind of give you comparison to. Like, it's about it. I just feel like there's a little bit more openness on the Ninja Pad and has that perfect static to dynamic friction and just makes for such a good aiming experience. It's almost like the Glee pad, if you've heard of that pad. It's like a handmade pad made in a like small amount. Like, I've talked to a couple owners of that pad who also own this pad, and they say that this pad is like slightly slower, and they're both just very high quality and compared to each other. So that's like the level of mouse pad that this is. It's just insanely high quality. I am considering selling it just because I need a new headset, a new keyboard, a new mouse. And like, dude, my room's like filled with mouse pads. Like, I have so many that I need to sell. I only need to keep like 3 or 4. So if you are interested in buying this, I will sell it to you for what I paid for it. And you will not have to go through any of the hassle that I went through through getting middleman or using third parties or anything like that. So if you're like a really hardcore into like aiming FPS games and you want, you like a nice controlled balance pad, perfect amount of static to dynamic friction, then this is probably the pad for you. This pad is absolutely insane. I remember one situation I was tracking Cole Cassidy in Overwatch, and whenever I reacted to him, he was on this high ground, I looked up at him, put my crosshair on him, perfectly on his head. I just remember making the movement and just looking at my crosshair stuck on his head, because he like paused for a minute to look around to see what was going on. He took, his reaction time. He was standing still and he looked around, and my crosshair just stops perfectly on his head, and I'm just like doing this like precise tracking on him, and it's just stuck to his head hitbox. It was actually insane. And that feeling if you ever used like a controlled hard pad or a control pad in general, like how that locked on target feeling feels like. So yeah, this has just enough speed to play good in games like Overwatch and the finals. I felt like in the finals, my aim was super dead on, even on no sleep. I was playing on no sleep with a friend and I was popping off on this pad. It's absolutely insane. It has just enough speed to handle those games while giving you that precise tracking, completely smooth experience from start to finish. So yeah, this pad is just insane. There's nothing like it on the market currently. Like, I have all these pads for rough comparison, but this is just the best I can do. None of these pads are made out of the same materials. The Atlas has a fucking coating on it. It's not really fair, but yeah, the closest I could think of is like, Serapad Ken, Razer Atlas for smoothness, and Skypad for smoothness. So yeah, this pad is insane. I'm considering looking for another one in the future, a different model, perhaps a faster one. I'm someone who prefers speed pads, and coming off of all these faster pads that I do have, this thing never felt like it was limiting my aim. In fact, I set tons of records in Aim Beast with this thing, doing precise and smooth tracking, and it just felt natural to use. The first day, it did take me a while to get used to it, but the second day, I stopped using PTFE on this, and I started using the TJX Plasti Skates. For the same reason I do it on the Serapad King, because it feels like with slower pads, like PTFE just kind of picks up on whatever texture there is. If you press down, if there's any pressure, it kind of gives you too much of a sense of control, and it slows down the glide. So trying to get a more like smooth experience, I threw the TJX skates on here, and they just were perfect. Like, just a nice smooth glide, no interference from the pad. Whereas whenever I was playing with the PTFE, I kind of had that, feeling a little too locked in, feeling a little too, wanted to play around with the options, see if I can get a different feel of this pad. But this mouse pad is insane. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about it, because I have a lot to say about it. But yeah, I got this like through a middleman, and I paid a lot for this mouse pad. If you are interested in buying one, this is probably your chance right here. There's not a single English review of this pad that I've seen on YouTube or on the internet at all. There's only like a handful of people in the USA that have these mouse pads. Pretty sure there's only a handful, and I'm one of them. So if you want to own this pad, I will consider selling it. If not, I have no problem keeping this pad. It's fucking insane. Blows all this shit out of the water. All of it. Let's see, I've talked about the smoothness. I've talked about some of the performance. I've talked about the size a little bit. The size didn't bother me. The edges are rounded. The case is really nice. It fits it perfectly. Another thing about the size is I found that you can kind of just grab it on both ends and just slide it straight back off your desk. And with like a bigger pad, you don't have to worry about hitting your keyboard or hitting the side of your computer, your monitor, anything that's on your desk. just kind of quickly just slide it right off the desk. And same thing when you take it out of here, you can just kind of put your fingers here and here and just kind of lift this thing up. It's just really nice. It was a really nice experience. This pad is amazing. Perfect amount of static to dynamic friction. Insanely smooth, better than any pad in the USA. If you want this, I will consider selling it to you. This pad is in pretty good condition. It's in good condition, I won't say great. It's in really good condition. There are light scratches, but they look like they're the type of scratches that are like on the Serapad, where you can only see them in the light, first of all. And second of all, this doesn't affect the performance at all. This thing is insanely smooth. So yeah, that's gonna be it on this mouse pad. If you liked the video, subscribe, leave a comment, show any support if you want. I'm just a guy that plays aim trainers and plays FPS games, and just enjoy like making videos like this to help people, and because it's fun. I mean, talking to other people who are into the same kind of thing, is fun. So yeah, that's gonna be it. Peace.